looks like we've got a little quorum of people here, Evan.
Yeah.
I think we should probably get rolling unless there's anything else we failed to mention.
No, I think that's about it. Really looking forward to this lineup. If you guys followed along with my blog posts over the last of the bunch, this includes a few that are in my top 5, including the last bottle, which ended up teetering everything else off the top and becoming my favorite. But let's start in order. We'll start with day 21, which is the Isle of Raasay, or Raasay, pardon me, single malt Scotch.
Raasay, yeah. And Evan, is everything in this back end peated to some extent or another?
Just about. Actually, you know what? Everything is except for the society bottle this time around. There's definitely a bit of peat for this one for Raasay with their batches that they've done so far, and I couldn't figure out. I was trying to figure out exactly which batch this came from, but there's no information on the half-size bottles that we have.
Pretty sure it's batch 2.
Yeah, that would make sense because that's most of what's available right now in full-size bottles. It's batch 2 as well. But Raasay, what they're doing is they seem to be taking blending when it comes to single malt very seriously. They do both peated and unpeated runs of spirit that they age in 3 different styles of cask for this sort of their signature release thus far for a young distillery. Both the peated side and the unpeated side are aged in ex-rye whiskey casks, Chinkapin oak casks, which is a little bit different and something that we'll probably be seeing a bit more of from other distilleries as time goes on, and ex-Bordeaux red wine casks as well, and then blended together for the final batching.
It's got a lot of malt. It's quite kind of green and grassy, and like mushrooms. It's like opening a bag of mushrooms to start dicing them up.
It's got a bit of that milk bone dog biscuits nose to it too, where it's that sort of malt grain driven style, but just something a little bit funky in there too in a good way.
Yeah, I was getting a bit of that little nice cheesy funk. The palate approach is quite nice. There's actually more peat there than I thought there was going to be based on the nose. Very balanced, clean, nice clean peat smoke, and they're sort of ashy.
Yeah, really nice fruit. You get that big coastal note as well, but fruit wise, like there's a lot of peaches, but also into some red fruits, strawberries and raspberries maybe coming in from the Bordeaux cask there for me.
Yeah, well, I can sort of see that it's got this kind of like Pear Williams sort of
eau de vie. Tom and Vi or Frederic say apple on the finish. Chris is an elf without a shell for those following along on Facebook.
Yeah. I kind of was expecting the full lederhosen. You know, he went to put the hat on, but I mean, all we can do is suggest.
That's right.
Yeah, it's got a nice creamy palate to it. For a young whiskey, I think it shows quite well. Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of new distilleries hitting the market. I will say, and I'm not a huge fan of the bottle shape from the standpoint of full-size bottles and shelves because it takes up too much space. But I have to say, like, it is pretty cool what they did with, you know, the ammonite shells and you know, other fossil elements on it.
Even on the mini bottle, like it's obvious they put a lot of thought into this, which is really cool.
Exactly. The fact that they went to the effort to kind of carry that branding into the minis is pretty bloody cool. Now, if that added to the cost, is it as cool, costing more money? But still, overall, I've been impressed with the first couple releases we've seen from them. Yeah,
and they seem to be. I know that there's a few different groups in Calgary that have approached them and maybe purchasing cask futures or casks from them to be laid down, and there's the potential that we may be seeing single casks on the market in the future as well. And I believe the same company is actually one of a handful of companies at this point that's planning to build a distillery in Campbelltown.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, they also have a hotel on the island, which I believe they own. This is one of those ones, the few that I've not had a chance to visit yet. And it's high on my list for this coming year. Because I am kind of curious to go and see the island and actually visit the distillery.
Yeah, I think it'd be a fun one to visit, not too far from Skye, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I mean, young, but it's got some character. It's not too spirity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
we've
fairly
had
light on the oak.
it is, and we've been lucky enough to have a pretty good showing of different younger distilleries in this calendar overall. This kind of joins Milk and Honey, as well as Linder's Abbey and King's Barnes in the list.
And the Douglas.
Yeah, and the Douglas distillery, that's right. I like the style, and it's peated, so peat does tend to be forgiving at a young age and sort of add nuance where there may not be nuance necessarily otherwise, but that coastal influence too, I think it benefits from as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
well,
going to
good starter.
Yeah, going to the history of the bottle.
Right.
I will share the screen, Andrew, for you.
Yeah. Well, this is all going to be a mystery to me because I actually got some of these off to Evan ahead of time. So yeah, the peat and sherry from Elements of Isla. This is a bit of a curious one where this was a yes or no. There wasn't multiple samples. It was more or less, hey, we've got a a blended at birth cask of Isla malts matured in sherry. Are you interested? And we tried it. I think when it hit the shelf, it was like $75.
Yeah,
and
it was not expensive.
No, and there was a lot of it. And it came in 2 tranches. And I remember thinking like, do we need to like limit this one? And we're like, nah, it's probably okay. And then after like the first week, people started ordering like 6 and 12 bottles of it. We're like, what the hell? So I think we ended up putting the brakes on when it sold out the first time before the second run came in, because again, we started seeing bottles of it at auction before we were sold out of it, which was a bit crazy. And, you know, it was a great whiskey. Was it the most complex cask we ever bottled? No, but it was kind of fun and people dug it and it disappeared really, really quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it must not have been, like, it did actually get scored on Whiskey Fun, which was kind of cool, but it didn't get an amazing score either. It was like 86 points or something.
No, but I think it was higher on Whiskey Base, and
Whiskey Base definitely is. Yeah,
I mean, you're talking about 3 different subcultures of Scotch whiskey there, like the heavily peated guys and gals, the heavily sherried folk, and then the peat and sherry folk. So there was people who wanted it regardless of what other people said about it. And it was coming from Elixir Distillers. So I think that got people excited.
Yeah.
But what was really funny about this is our importer forgot to order it 3 times. So the second tranche of it came like 9 months after we'd sold out of the first, because they kept forgetting, either Pacific or the distributor Elixir kept forgetting to put it on the pallet manifest and it wouldn't ship. But eventually it came in, and I think we ended up having to limit it to 1 bottle per person. The last chunk came in. But
it did kind of, I agree with what you said with the peat and the sherry. It did kind of hit the Venn diagram for a lot of people for what they were looking for.
It was a malt for a time and a place.
Yep.
But yeah, we'd love to do something like that again. Whether that option comes up will be interesting to see. But
yeah, absolutely.
It is worth noting though, really quickly before we move on, Elements of Isla is rebranding, and they are doing kind of bourbon peated malt and a sherry peated malt that'll be part of their core range. They're getting rid of just the plain peat and the peat foolproof, and they're also going to be moving to full-size bottles too. So peat.
That's right. Speaking of peat, on to day 22, which is the Paul John Peated Select Cask. So this guy, we had the Paul John PX on, what was that, day 3 or something like that. I was really impressed with it. It was day 3, and that one was bottled at 46% alcohol. The Peated Select Cask, however, is more of a batch strength, where it is bottled at 55.5% alcohol, which is always nice to see it north of 50 there. So using Paul John Distilleries, or India's own 6-year-old barley that's grown around the Goa region and to the north from other provinces in India, and using peat that's actually sourced from, I think, Isla and the Highlands, if I remember correctly, which they actually have shipped to their distillery, and then they use a kiln to fire it up and use it to dry their own barley there. So pretty cool combination where you get the best of India and the best of Scotland both at the same time with this one.
I think Chris has got a pretty good note on this.
Yeah.
He says smells like Chinese barbecue duck, little bit of Peking duck.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Maybe not too much hoisin sauce, but you got those like flat little rice pancakes and the Peking duck in there. Yeah, I like that. That's a good call.
Even like a bit of like orange and marmalade in with the smoking peat, which is really nice as well.
Because it's got that little bit of like a gamey oiliness to it.
Yeah, and that stickiness of it all as well.
You could even say like a little bit like the dark meat on a turkey.
Yeah, with the crispy skin still hanging on. Jamie Rodriguez said smoked cheese. You know, it does go into smoked Gouda territory. Good call there, Jamie.
Man, I was not expecting that palate to be as peaty as it is. And there's also like a hot spice element to it too. It's not like hot alcohol wise. There's a hot spice. Yeah,
it's a really neat palate. Once again, I think Paul John Distillery it's kind of the underrated of the two big Indian distilleries that everybody knows if they know any Indian distilleries at this point, which would be Amrit and then John Distillers itself. But I really like their style, and I think they do some great peated stuff. My notes had veered everywhere from smoky and savory into tropical, where I get like tangerines and mangoes and pineapple on the palate as well. Sweet lemonade, a bit of ground pepper. It's a cool whiskey. And this did make it into my personal top 6 list. I called it for the tasting there. What's that?
I love the wording on the back of the bottle in bright red on white background for export overseas. I mean, the reality is most of this stuff doesn't stay in India. No. And I think they get taxed really heavily for what they do produce and leave in country. Also, like, I did find it a bit warm, but again, I'm kind of stunned this is 55%.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it's a really, really well put together whiskey. Probably not super old, but also not just straight off the still.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you know, and I know Cam mentioned in there that spice element too. Like, I really think this has got some really interesting character on it. Sorry, it was Chris who mentioned it. Yeah, I'm gonna add a bit of water just to see. I did end up adding a little bit of water in my Raasay too, just to see what
was the Raasay with it.
The nose gets a bit more new make-ish with water in there, so I didn't really like the nose with water.
Yeah, I think it brings out the eau de vie note more with the Pear Williams, and it just maybe even going into a bit of mezcal.
It gets a bit barnyardy with water in it, which I'm not a big fan of. But the Paul John, it really just mellows the nose, like not flavor wise, but just in terms of that.
It goes more into meaty territory for me, where it's like smoked ribs and brisket.
It is. It stays very meaty. I am getting a bit more fruit with it now though too, but the spice, like, good Lord, that is
Yeah.
one of the not maybe the spiciest whiskeys I've had, but heat wise, it's one of the spiciest whiskeys I've had in a very long time.
And I think that's part of what I like about it. Sweet and sour, Zach says that's a really good call. I'm not usually a big spice guy when it comes to food, but the combination of the spice and the meatiness and the sweetness at the same time on here is really enticing.
Mm-hmm. Tasty.
Mm-hmm. Okay, on to the history in a bottle for the day. Here you go, Andrew.
Yeah, Clynelish 24 from Single Malts of Scotland. This one was an absolute cracker. You know, I remember when we ordered it and I was like, oh man, 350 or 340, whatever it was, like that's a lot for a 24-year-old single cask, but it's Clynelish. And I mean, we've seen some crazy shit since then. And not to mention the fact that there was like that Clynelish flavor-led bottling that didn't even have an age statement on it, and it was $800-ish a bottle. So this one was dynamite. It was thick, waxy, honeyed, just loaded with fruit.
It was exactly what you want from like refill Clynelish at that age.
It was perfect Clynelish.
Yeah.
I mean, we struggle with that because we're always kind of chasing the dragon, like trying to get the perfect Clynelish bottling. And sometimes things get close, but rarely are they that good. And in retrospect, like the concerns about the price were ludicrous. Like it sold out really quickly because anybody who knew anything knew that like the supply of 24-year-old Clynelish moving forward, whiskeys like that was not going to be good. So it was a gem. It's funny. I think we looked back because I'd forgotten, but I think we've bottled at least 4 other Clynelish for the shop.
Since then, it was one where we'd never done it before, and then all of a sudden, in a time where Clynelish should be near impossible to get, we'd managed to get a handful since.
Absolutely, like there was that great 12-year-old Clynelish from Signatory that you and I picked when we were at the warehouse. There was the 20-year-old with the Boutique Whiskey Company. There was a cask that we did with the Companions of the Quake. There might have been one other one in there too, but it was just, it was a short-lived burst of Clynelish activity, and the Clynelish
never to be
options
seen
have gone
again.
dormant again. So,
got to wait for another Compass Box bottling to see Clynelish again, probably. Yeah. Okay, on to this would be day 23 for the Kilchoman Machir Bay. So this is a return for us in the calendar. I had to look it up, and I was able to figure it out with Andrew's help that this was in probably the first of the Kensington Wine Market built calendars back in 2014. Which is really cool. It was first released, the Machir Bay, back in 2012, but it's a really cool one to revisit from a distillery that it's pretty obvious we have a love for at Kensington Wine Market, given all the single casks we've had over the years from them, and all the times it's been featured as a single cask or otherwise in our whiskey calendar. We had the Kilchoman Snag earlier in the calendar as well, which is a fantastic dram. I was really impressed with the Snag this time around. That is a bottling that's really evolved since it was first released in a good manner. So it's fun to check out the Machir Bay again as well. So this is more on the ex-bourbon side of things. I think they do say they use a little bit of sherry casks in here, but it's based on the nose, it's pretty dominant on the ex-bourbon side of things for me.
And sorry, Evan, I'm just replying to somebody on Twitter. I'll be right, or on Facebook. I'll be right back.
All good. So this one, you get a lot of, Chris says Ovaltine and lilac. So that's a good nose. Kilchoman does tend to come with this really nice creaminess to it. I get where you're going with the Ovaltine and the floral note in there as well. I think that's a good call. One thing that Kilchoman tends to give me that I love bringing out as a tasting note is the nose is like passing the olive bar in a superstore. where you get that sort of oily, funky, olivey note to it on top of everything else.
Yeah, it's like a nice tapenade on like a toasted little piece of brioche. I don't think there's been, I don't know if there's been a Kensington calendar that has not had a Kilchoman in it.
There like maybe one
Yeah.
from what I can see from our archives, but not many.
Because I think we might have even done Loch Gorm way back when, before it was uber popular. And I know that we've done minis of at least 5 of our casks. So I think, just looking at the math, if we had a year that there wasn't a Kilchoman, there was one, and that's it. And these ones, to be honest, I think we talked about this when we did the Saneg. This one was serendipitous. This is not something that was on our radar. And we found out it was in market. I looked back at how long it had been since we'd used it. And I was like, you know what, we better just buy that as insurance, because based on the last few years, we don't know how things are going to go. And again, we talked about this when we sampled on the day 3 or the 3rd tasting, when we sampled the Douglas whiskey. If that Douglas whiskey hadn't come in, we wouldn't have been able to put 25 bottles in the calendar this year. And if the Kilchoman Saneg and Machir Bay hadn't come in, we wouldn't have been able to put 23 bottles in the calendar. I mean, despite ordering things way further in advance than ever before. So these actually turned out to be quite serendipitous.
So the notes on this one, I gotta say, for me, and it had been a while since I've tasted the Machir Bay, but this seems a little bit more youthful than some of the Machir Bay that I feel I've had in the past. It is a little bit more spirit driven. If you Tom and Vi and Frederic say hand soap on the nose. It reminds me of, if you've ever had a Lynchburg lemonade, where they it's essentially Jack Daniels. I think then there might be some cola and then some lemonade in there, where you get that sort of spirit driven note with the citrus as well. Still has that really good creaminess that Kilchoman tends to have. It goes into macadamia nuts and such as well, but it seems more on the youthful side, especially compared to the snake that we had earlier in the calendar.
You know, what might be happening there, Evan, and that might be the case, because I know Kilchoman's had some growing pains. They've obviously opened up their new distilling, their new distillery, or their like the second set of stills and whatnot. And I think they're planning to do a 3rd set of stills so that they can continue to grow their production, which is crazy, because already they're producing 3 times what Springbank does, and they're struggling to sell it, which is kind of funny to wrap your head around. But I think I'd be curious about this, because I know every year Machir Bay was, for a while, getting older every time it was bottled. And it does make me wonder if maybe this is more about the cask selection and there's more refill in here than first fill. And I was just on their site, so I'm trying to pull that back up here, because they do say they use bourbon and sherry casks, but there's not any specification about how much is first fill versus refill. And the percentages are essentially just the opposite of what they say for the snag, where the snag's essentially like 70 or 80% sherry. This is more 70 or 80% ex-bourbon. But it does show the style well. I mean, it's still Kilchoman, and even Kilchoman as new make is so drinkable, where it's got that creaminess and really nice phenolic touch to it. There's some nice fatty oils in it. Citrus, lemon, orange notes, nice salt, kind of salty caramel tone too. I think it's good, but I agree, it doesn't seem quite as bourbon driven as it used to be. Okay, for the history in a bottle, this was a fun one that we got a couple years back. And Evan, I just did a quick whiskey base search on this. It looks like the 2022 batches of Machir Bay are roughly 90% bourbon and only 10% sherry. Makes sense.
So for the history of the bottle companion piece to this is the first edition's Aberlour, which was a really neat bottling that we got about 3 years ago now, 4 years.
Yeah, and it was peated. It was not
Mhm.
sherry, peated Aberlour. Yeah, it was that. This was a fun whiskey. I mean,
Yeah,
this was fun to pour for people who liked Aberlour, and then to kind of blow their minds because it was like nothing they'd ever had before. We talked about that kind of barbecue brisket note in the Paul John, but I think
yep.
this was like loaded with barbecue notes.
Yeah, and this nice creamy ashiness on the palate as well.
Mhm. Yeah, it was a great dram. It also featured in a calendar at one point in time. We had minis of it. Funny little side note on that, the minis came without labels,
Yep.
which is not to say that they didn't have labels, but they had like a utilitarian white label with just like, I don't even remember what details, the alcohol, the
Yeah.
size was on there.
Yeah, it's like they tried to put a barcode on the front, but forgot the barcode essentially.
And it was the bare minimum label. It was the bare
Yeah.
minimum required information wise to put on there. So we actually gave the importer shit, and he had little labels made to put on there. And it's funny because a guy from the AGLC was in my office around this time, and he found the little stack of labels. And he's like, "What are these?" And I was like, "Oh, I can explain that." And I showed him the way the bottles had arrived from the producer. I'm like, we don't want to put these out there like this. Like, we're not covering the back, but we had to put something else on there because this looks like nothing.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I see what you mean there. And that was the end of that. But it was so funny for the longest time. And every time we sold through some of those, the staff would have to label them, which they just hated because there was about 800 of those little bottles over time.
Yeah, that was also the mysterious double size order. From
That's right. I forgot about that. Somehow we ended up with, instead of 700 or just under 700 bottles, we ended up with 1,400, which is a lot of minis to sell.
Somehow between the agents and Kensington Wine Market, there was a translation error from imperial to metric and back or something like that that really threw everything off.
Who knows what happened on that one, but anyway, it all worked out in the end. We don't have any of the stock left. But that also explains why there was so few bottles in, like, because think about that, 700 minis is going to eat up about 70 bottles worth of whiskey. If my math is roughly correct, it's probably not. Jeff will probably correct me there. But yeah, he's got his calculator out. I love it. Anyway, it was a cool one. I'll be honest, it was one of those ones where there was a half dozen or more bottles we could have featured on the calendar, but I just loved that this was a wacky, unusual Aberlour. And you know, there's a lot of other things we could have included. It's impossible when we've done 135 or 40 single casks that have already arrived at the store to narrow it down to pick 25. But yeah,
well, it does really show kind of the eclecticness of how we go about selecting casks too, because there are definitely distilleries that we're guilty of chasing, such as Kilchoman and Clynelish and the likes. And although we're all fans of Aberlour, that was you couldn't get more atypical for an Aberlour for what people were looking for, as Andrew was saying. So we knew it was going to be sort of an uphill battle to sell it when it came in, but it was just so much fun that we couldn't turn it down.
Well, we're overdue for a Kilchoman because we didn't bottle one this year, so we better get on that. That's
right. Well, let's head to day 24 for what would be the Christmas Eve dram, and that is the Boutique Souptown blend. And I'm going to bring up the label here just so, because it's so much fun. And if you haven't seen the YouTube video that Andrew and Dave Worthington put together for all the boutique bottlings, but for the the suit town especially. It's a lot of fun and chock full of information that I wasn't aware of about this bottle too, which is really neat. So 24 years old. This would be, I believe, the second oldest dram in the calendar behind the Cameron Bridge from Boutique. And this is a blend for a long time. We had up until I changed everything after getting more information from the YouTube video. We said this was a teaspoon malt, but it is not, according to Dave Worthington. This is actually a blend that is a combination of Glen Scotia and Loch Lomond, who both happen to be owned by the same company.
In some ways, that actually makes it more interesting.
It does.
The fact that it is actually I think he said it's even like a roughly 50-50 blend of the two spirits. But the other thing that Evan didn't know, and there was a lot of back and forth on this, is the exact same batch, despite it saying batch 2 on the label. This is the exact same batch of liquid from batch 1. And the story on this is that to offer us minis of this, they actually had to pull bottled stock from the American market, which I guess is done in 375 mils, if I remember correctly. And
there is the 375 is on Whiskey Base.
Dump them into a tank and then fill the minis for the calendar. So it's not a different batch. It's identical to the 500 mils that we've had in the store now for about a year.
God, this is such a throwback in style, even for sherried whiskeys, but it's also such a weird dichotomy of aromas and flavors, where you get the tropical and the sherry at the same time.
Well, I mean,
go ahead.
No, I haven't finished your thought before I.
Plus this sort of light sootiness and this sort of it evokes the dilapidated Glen Scotia with the rusted metal and falling apart still house that they used to have before everything was kind of more nicely taken care of in the late 2000s. Well,
one other thing to consider about this is you have potentially, and I'm sure it's not quite that many, but you potentially have up to 14, 15 different spirit styles blended in here. Now, we don't know they did that, but Loch Lomond makes a crazy range of spirits, and there could be more than one of those married into this. I love the Campbellton funk on this that's coming across on the nose, those salty tones, that little bit of peat. The cheesy
even
funk.
The Loch Lomond, after you hear it, makes sense too, where you get that slight weird cheesiness and that sort of touch of astringence that they get to their peat, plus the sort of burning wet cardboard note that I swear is in just about all their peated whiskey that I actually enjoy so much.
Or like melting plastic wires. Like the little plastic shells and wires melts. There's some nice fruits in there too. There's even something that reminds me a bit of like Armagnac on the nose.
That again, going into tobacco and leather notes, but still has this great sort of touch of bitterness that's coming both from the sherry, but also from these green fruit notes that come through as well on the palate in a remarkable manner.
This is a whiskey which I think we finally moved through most of what we bought in the full size bottles, but it's been a struggle. I mean, this is something where in a time period where, Evan had that funny picture up in his post, Campbellton's so hot right now, which is true. We have this blended malt we thought was teaspoon Glen Scotia, but even if it's not, it's clearly Campbellton heavy. And for the longest time, and it's 24 years old, and people would try to be like, I like it, but like no one wanted to buy it. And I think we're starting to I've noticed this over the last little while, we've started to see this tipping point where people who've been drinking whiskey for a while are willing to okay, the bottle looks a little weird, because frankly, all the boutique bottles look a little to a lot weird. And I think people they struggle buying it. I don't know if maybe they think their friends will judge them if they see it sitting on the bar. But like, and we've talked about it in the other tastings, like every single whiskey we had from them this year was excellent.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
whether it's the bottle size or the wonky labels, like most people just can't seem to wrap their heads around them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this I almost it was close to being in my top of the whiskeys in the calendar, but I felt like I was already pretty boutique heavy in there, because I mean the Space Side and the Cameron Bridge didn't make it to my list, but they easily could have, or Speyburn, pardon me, because they were both so good as well.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a great cask. I've not added water to it, but I might, just for fun and for science.
Yeah.
I almost
I'll
added
join
the
you on that.
society whiskey to it there, but I won't do that.
Yeah, even a nice nuttiness on the finish right now.
Well, yeah, the nose shows really well, even with a drop of water, which is a bit surprising.
Yeah, actually brings out a bit more of the dried fruit notes.
And yeah, the palate actually, I think, takes water quite well, which is not something you hear very often from me.
No.
Salted caramel, a lot of fruit, some nice cheesy tones there too. It's like you've got a charcuterie board in front of you with like some pickled vegetables, like dried apricot chunks, cheese, olives, like a whole bunch of stuff going on there. And I just have to say, like, this is, of all the Campbellton, or not, of all the boutique labels, I think this one might be one of my favorites, the Soup Town. Welcome to Soup Town, a lovely town.
Well, even the palette choices when it comes to color just evoke the sort of dinginess of Campbelltown itself in a really cool manner.
Drab, slightly overcast almost all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. What do we got on the archive, Evan?
So this is the last two are sort of a combination of past and present when it comes to bottlings.
Oh yeah. I kind of struggled with whether to put this on the calendar in that gallery, because we still have it. Like, this only landed about 5 months ago, but this is,
it's kind of like putting a NHL player in the Hall of Fame while they're still playing.
Yeah,
in a way.
This is one of the top 10 whiskeys in the entire collection of the Kensington bottlings we've done, in my opinion. Some, like our Glenallachie, have sold out faster, but for things that I feel are just like very well made, complex, beautiful, I think this is right up there. The fact that it contains like, a decent chunk of 17-year-old Ardbeg is incredibly cool. The fact that it includes a bunch of more, like, all from bourbon, not what you normally associate with that distillery, but a style that I think works really well with this blend. And then, I really love this time what they did with the label. They did make Calgary look a little bit like Denver, where the mountains are looming directly behind the city. But, I wanted this one to kind of, as part of our 30th anniversary, when we were talking about what I wanted the label to look like, I said that I wanted to pay homage to our home. The shop has roots that now stretch across the country, which is incredible, but it all started in Kensington and Calgary, and I really wanted that to be paid homage to on the bottle, and I think they did an awesome job with it. We talked about this with the other one, but this is, in a way, this is kind of a cool whiskey for me, just legacy wise for the business, knowing how infrequently Compass Box will do bespoke blends like this for like a single retailer. And they've done some, but not a lot. And, I'll never forget the call I got from the rep, who's like, hey, I thought I'd just call you and stroke your ego a little bit. I thought you'd like to know that I've had about a dozen inquiries since you launched the new 30th anniversary bottling from retailers in Alberta and BC that want to do one too. And he said, and I had to tell them that they probably won't get to do one, because that's not, Compass Box picks and chooses who they do these sorts of projects with. And so it's very humbling to do it not just once, but twice. And yeah, It's awesome. It's one of the whiskeys I'm most proud of, not just because it was bottled for us, but we had a chance to help create it. And Evan and Kurt and Sean all had a say in it too. Sean's advice on it was like the last little tweak that I think really made it work.
Yeah.
His suggestion is he thought it should just be a tiny bit brighter, and they bumped up the amount of teanic in the blend to achieve that, and it worked. And then the funniest part about the whole thing, and this kind of sums up both Compass Box but also Kensington to me, was I got a call from James Saxon, the blender, who's like, "Hey, I just thought you should know, we can't be 100% confident of the actual blend, because when they went to do the bottling, one of the components was slightly short, but they didn't figure out which, because the guys in the bottling hall weren't paying close enough attention. So James had to do another like tweaking of it with components that were left over to bring it back to where it was." And so I asked him when he told me this, I said, "Hey, can we still do, your Compass Box information chart, but just put a footnote on it that says that there's a margin of error?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course." And I love that degree of transparency, and the fact that, we're not looking at this as something to be ashamed of, but just a reality that happens from time to time. And it just kind of adds to the story and the narrative of the bottling.
It does really encompass Kensington wine market, where our motto should be, we'll screw things up, but we'll carry on, more than anything else.
For sure. All right. Well, we've got some special guests joining us for this last bottle. Well, I mean, one special guest. We've got Kelly Carpenter joining us.
That's right.
And Rob. Where's RT? Is RT not joining us today too, or?
He's just behind us on the couch,
Okay,
chilling.
He's chilling. I respect that. For those who don't know, I'm sure most of you do, Rob and Kelly are the founders of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society Canada, also behind Holyrood Distillery, and they're joining us from Calgary. So thanks for joining us tonight to try what I think we can say without spoiling it is the coolest society bottling we've had in the 8 calendars that the society has been a part of.
Yeah, I'm gonna just jump in and agree with that. That's I had my sort of my top whiskey dead set since day 4, and there was a bottle that came close to it from that boutique whiskey company. My second favorite's the boutique Teanic, and the boutique Inchfad that we had came really close to toppling that, but I didn't think anything would. And then I just nosed the society bottle, and it was just like, holy, this is like, it's what I was hoping it would be based on the name. I like making fun of the society for their naming choices and tasting notes in a lot of cases, because they tend to be very poetic and imaginary in some cases, just like my own. But I think they nailed the title on this, on top of everything else.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's great.
Orange creamsicle all the way. It's perfectly named. Perfect. Not a very crazy name, but perfectly named.
Well, I remember the day Evan was writing the tasting note for this, and I was occupied with something in my office, and he's like, "You need to try this." And I was like, "What is it?" And he's like, "It's the society bottle from the calendar." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'll try it. I'll try it when we do the tasting." He's like, no, you need to try this. So, and he was right. It was, it's a gorgeous bottling. It's one of the older society bottlings, if not the oldest society bottling we've had in the calendar.
Yeah. And
it has a profile that I really love. I busted out the blender's glass so that I can kind of amp up the nose on it a little bit. It's kind of going in that tropical territory that I really love.
Yeah, so one shy of being a benchmark bottling for the society as well, where it's 63.99. So the 99th cask from Glen Talker's distillery in this case.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when we were talking about this about a year ago now, Andrew, we came to you and said, we want to get the ball rolling on this now so that we can hopefully get it in Canada in time to put in your calendar because of, the challenges. And we came to you, we said, we'd like to do something older because we've been really in that sort of 8 to 11 year range with the goal being not to skew the overall price of your calendar. And I said, but we'd really like to do something older. I don't know what that's going to look like price wise, but are you open to us exploring it? And you were like, yeah, for sure. So we went back to HQ and you told us how many you were after, and we gave them the parameters, and they came back with 3 options for us. And I'm sitting here trying very hard to remember what the other 2 were. Maybe one of them was a Manic More. I can't remember the third, but so I sent you the options, and it was just sort of the bare bones. We knew the age, we knew the distillery, we knew maybe the flavor profile, but we didn't have a tasting note. We didn't have a bottle name. It's pretty bare bones. And you came back and you said, I'm all over the 19-year-old Glen Talkers because that sounds awesome. So that's what we went with.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it worked out.
It really did. Glen Talkers, I mean, for me, like, is kind of a hidden gem distillery. I don't think Chivas Brothers knows or cares what they have there in terms of like the quality of spirit that comes out of it. And I think the rest of us through independent bottlers, that it's to our benefit. Like, that's why we get to see some of these cool bottlings from it. But it's kind of also kind of emblematic too for me of, we've seen over the last 2-3 years that the society has been managing to acquire more stock with a bit more age behind it as well too, because it seemed for a while like everything was trending down. And yeah, this is a beautiful bottling. And I agree with Evan of everything we've had, and I'm not trying to skew people's votes, but I mean, I think this is, for me, unquestionably the highlight of the calendar this year.
Yeah, it's just an absolute knockout of a dram. Like, this would stand out in the outturn you put it in my opinion, where it's just so bright and fruity and creamy and waxy and just balanced on top of everything else, where like nothing takes over anything else. It's you give it time and it'll show you everything. And even the finish on this, and I believe it's an ex-bourbon barrel, if I remember correctly, or ex-bourbon cask. It's so lengthy, like it stays in the moat so well. It's incredible.
Much oil on it.
And it will be showing up in an outturn. And the really fun thing about that is that when for the last couple of years, when we've gone to HQ with the annual KWM Advent request, it used to be we'd get part of a cask and the rest would get bottled into full sizes and go off somewhere else. And they've tweaked their regulations now, where when we want to go and ask them for this, we have to commit to taking a whole cask. So they are tasked with finding a cask that doesn't have so much liquid in it that SMWS Canada would be overwhelmed with bottles. So this is in fact exclusive to Canada, and there are 750s or 700s, I don't remember which, but there are full-size bottles coming in an outturn. But the really fun thing is, where it says on the label what the outturn is, on the big bottles it says 1 of 63.
Yeah,
that's all
that is
big bottles. So that, because you took 600 minis or something, so there were only 63 full-size bottles left. So when you see that in the outturn, someone's going to go 63 bottles. Oh my God. Well, that's why, because most of it went into.
I don't. My guess is when we see that, it's not going to last long too, because that's a tiny outturn for all of Canada.
Yep.
Well, I'm just looking at that, Kelly. If there was 600 on the money, 100 mils of this, that ate up 85.7 bottles worth of liquid. So the bulk of it was in 100 mils. We do have stock of the 100 mils left over.
Yes,
too,
we do.
So that might make up for the fact that there's maybe not as much of the 700, 750s as there might otherwise be. But there is one other curious fact on this, because even then, if that's the case, this is a cask that only yielded about 150-ish bottles, which is pretty low. But all you have to do is look at the ABV, 51.3. Like, this was either a not so well coopered cask, or it gave away a decent angel share, and that could be to the benefit of the profile from it. That could
totally.
be why it's so fruity and
oily. Yeah.
So Andrew, I'll be shooting you an email early in January to start the conversation for 2023.
Please do. But I think it's gorgeous. Really happy with how it turned out, and yeah, I think it's, I was excited. I think I'd forgotten. I mean, that's how these things often go is, we order the components, I put them in a spreadsheet and I forget about them. And I don't even, because I didn't have the cask number and I didn't save the age or anything. I just knew that it was like a Society 100 mil and roughly the wholesale price on it.
Yeah.
And that's where it sat in my spreadsheet until it arrived in store. I'm like, oh man, I forgot that this was a 19-year-old Glen Talkers. So
Yeah. That's again, that encapsulates Kensington wine market so well is that what comes off as perfect planning is typically more serendipity than anything else.
well, there's a bit of that. Maybe it's we've planned enough that we can forget about it. But,
That's a good way to spin it. Yeah.
Right.
yeah, I don't want to add water to this. I don't know if anyone added water to theirs, but
I did, and it does not get killed. It stands up really nicely. I don't necessarily think it needs it, but it didn't destroy it for me.
I did see Dave just joined us from Ontario. Dave, we are on the Society bottling. However, we do our speed round where Evan and I like to go back through the whiskeys one more time just to see if they've evolved, changed in the glass, or our palates have changed. But yeah, we are on number 5. So Rob, Kelly, before we let you guys go, any spoilers, things for people to watch out for in 2023 from the Society?
Well, 2023 marks the Society's 40th anniversary, which is
Cool.
mind-boggling. So HQ has all kinds of cool things on tap that we will eventually see. Whether they fall into the calendar year remains to be seen because of shipping and everything else, but there will be some cool things coming down the pipe. We're hoping there'll be another Vault collection release, hopefully mid-March. I have yet to talk to you guys about that, but that's an iconic Speyside distillery coming in March in the Vaults collection. And yeah, that's...
Well, it just
you did it.
January, was the return of festivals.
Yep.
So, Calgary and Victoria and other things. So,
well, yeah, and
busy beginning of the year.
Probably the biggest news is that it's taken 40 years, but this year we'll see the very first Canadian single malt to be bottled by the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. And that will be released in the first half. I'm not going to be any more specific than that of the year. So that's a significant milestone.
Yeah, that's cool.
On Rob and Kelly, since we've got a couple BCers on here, you guys are headed to the Victoria Festival?
Absolutely.
Yep. We'll be able to.
Yep.
With our ambassador.
Yep.
Bringing him over from Scotland.
Yep.
Right on.
Yeah. So it should be a fun year. Should be some cool things coming down the pipe. So we're excited about it.
Well, it's good to hear. Yeah. 2023. I'll be honest, I've not done a lot of planning for that yet, but that's what the first 2 weeks of January are for.
I was gonna say, man, it's okay. You still got 5 days, so
yeah,
no hurry.
Oh man, just getting through 2022 was tough. So, and then you get the dog, and you start caring just a little bit less about the things that aren't getting done because he's just so damn cute. Currently lying splayed out on the floor next to my feet.
Well, I think that dog has done wonders for you, man. So
it's definitely improved my quality of life. That there's no doubt about that. So,
and you look similar too.
Yeah.
Well,
usually they grow into that, but he actually looked for a dog that did look similar to him beforehand.
Bit of brown and gray on both of our faces. So, but yeah, and 2023 is going to be my 20th anniversary in the Scotch whiskey biz. So that's coming up too. I just realized that the other day. I was like, and I've spent the last several years putting my face on bottles, and this would be the year to do it.
I was just going to ask. I assume you're doing a bottling for this.
Well, I'm going to have to figure that out. That's all stuff that I need to start thinking about tomorrow.
In the next 5 days.
Today got taken off, so
yeah,
that's a tomorrow problem. Anyway,
the reason Kurt's around actually is so that he has someone to ghostwrite his memoir. That's next on the docket.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to start making notes. Anyway, well, Rob, Kelly, nice to see you. Happy Hogmanay, or Happy New Year.
Hi.
Jazz. Yeah, and talk to you guys soon. Hopefully, you'll stick around so you can vote.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
But thanks for joining us. All
Yeah,
right,
thanks for the
Evans.
awesome bottle.
Yeah, and thanks for the awesome bottle. Speed round.
Okay. It's back to the Raasay, pardon me.
Yeah,
I'll get
Raasay.
that
We're
right
gonna get it
eventually.
right on the first try eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe by the time they have a 10-year-old, if I really work on it.
Oh man, that nose now is like saltwater taffy, salted
that's a good
caramel
call.
ice cream, French butter, like the proper salted French butter. And like
Yeah,
all
saltwater
the,
lemon bonbons for me right now too. That sort of that taffy waxiness coming through with the saltiness too. Really
I could
nice.
see a bit more like lemon pledge, like if you were going to polish the church pews. It's just very vegetal.
Dustin says freshly opened bag of sun-kissed raisins on the nose. Very cool. Yeah, it does have a bit of that sort of like musty raisin-like note with
For me on the
the
palate, it's
cardboard
more like
box.
sunflower seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's got that little bit of oiliness, that kind of gritty, almost chalkiness to them.
Yeah. Okay, back to the Paul John.
Yeah. Before we go, Evan, I just have to say again, like, I just think that that's a very promising sign of where they're going with Raasay.
Oh,
So,
totally. Yeah, I'm really impressed with what they have so far. Kind of the same way I was with Ardnamurchan last year when we had the mini bottle of it, where it really stood out for me in a good manner.
mhm.
A little bit of like spray paint or WD-40 on fire right there, right now on the Paul John for me.
The WD-40 I get, along with some pretty prominent Werther's originals.
Yeah,
And trying to pinpoint it here, but
touch of shoe polish, I'd say as well, like
it's like
on leather shoes.
kerosene smoke.
Yeah,
Like from a kerosene fire.
yeah. Kevin says smoked bacon. Yeah, definitely has that as well. Even into like those iodized bacon bits.
Well, the palate's definitely got that smoky bacon. It's still spicy, but it's toned down quite a bit from before. But towards the finish, that spice really starts to kick back in again. That
Yeah,
is an
going
incredibly
into
spicy whiskey.
it's like the cracked peppercorns on a slab of beef jerky right now for me.
Quite chewy.
Mhm.
Lots of character. All right.
Back to the Kilchoman Machir Bay. Going into Play-Doh territory on the nose right now for me. Play-Doh where you dumped a bit of mezcal on it.
Or even like papier mâché. That's something I've not done or smelled in a very long time, probably since like kindergarten or elementary school.
Yeah, a little bit of like pulling the vinyl record, fresh vinyl record out of a fresh sleeve as well.
I think the mezcal note is a good one though. Like that, I can see some real strong parallels there between the two. Firm but clean smoke, bit of citrus. There's a lot of like there's a really like thick oiliness to the palate too. Shows well.
Okay, next up is the Soup Town, 24-year-old.
A lovely town that is.
Oh, so dense, just like raisins and pumpernickel right now on the nose for me. Or a molasses, yeah.
Apparently Zach likes to drink mezcal while playing with Play-Doh. Like that seems like a worthy way to spend an evening or an afternoon.
That's right. Got to kill the time over Christmas holiday somehow, sometime.
I mean, as long as the children aren't enjoying the mezcal as much as the Play-Doh, you're probably good. Farmy.
Yeah, still has that great pineapple note on the palate and the nose though as well.
Yeah, Andrew saying grappa and latex paint. I can definitely see that grappa tone on the palate. And that might be coming from that, like that grape influence from the sherry cask. It's hard to say, but
Mhm.
yeah,
Are you talking the Kilchoman or the Soup Town?
the Soup Town.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, and then last but not least, back to the society bottle. Just mangoes and sunscreen on the nose right now for me.
Wow. For me, it's like going into a tiki bar. I'm just getting like really bright citrusy cocktails.
Yeah,
Loads
Hawaiian
of fruit.
t-shirts.
And what?
Hawaiian t-shirts.
Wine t-shirts, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit of suntan lotion, not
Yeah.
actually sunscreen. Like they're oiling themselves up to get a good
Yeah.
skin burn. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that nose is just beautiful.
all right.
The fact that that shows up so nicely after those 5 bottles too, being the only unpeated whiskey in the lineup, is impressive.
I'm glad that I've got more of it to put into my glass, to be totally honest.
Yeah, there's a couple less 100 milliliter bottles for people to purchase because I've already grabbed 2.
Don't blame you. All right, Evan,
Yeah, shall
fire
we
up the
do
voting here?
the poll?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 2 polls for you. We'll start with your first 2 favorites of the last 5 days, and then we'll do a little bit more of an overarching poll for the entire calendar. And Kelly and Rob, if you want, I can unhost you so that you can vote as well.
That's a thumbs up, Evan. I think you've got license to pull their license.
See if that allows you to see the poll or not, or I'm not sure. Perfect.
Yeah, they're in there.
So Andrew, while everybody else is voting, of these 5, what are your top 2?
Well, I mean, the society bottle is number 1 for sure.
Yeah.
I'm kind of torn between the Paul John and the Raasay, to be totally honest with you.
Cool.
I love how spicy the Paul John was. But I think I'm leaning a little bit towards the Raasay, which is cool because I'm noticing for round 1 it didn't get a vote. Did it get a round 2? It didn't even get a round 2 vote. So
Well, let's
I'm
since
bucking the
everybody's
trend
voted.
there.
Yeah.
Which is cool. But I like the Soup Town. I don't know, maybe I think I put water into it too. I think water might have killed it for me. But yeah, I think the way I'm looking at these things, the Raasay is probably 4 years old, and I think it's showing extremely well for 4 years of age.
Yeah, totally agree. I would definitely pick the society bottle as my first, and then Paul John just nudges out the Raasay and the Space Side, or sorry, the boutique blend, the Soup Town.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And the funny thing is too, like on different nights, I think my second choice might have varied slightly, but yeah. So Tom and Vi, I think are suggesting through the chat that even though we can't narrow down what their first and second choice was, the 3 of them were all in agreement. So we could, in theory, add points to it, but we can't, so we won't.
That's right.
But like, I love that showing that the boutique did quite well in that against the Glen Talkers. It got pretty close. So Uptown would be a great name for a whiskey. I think they meant Soup Town by that. The SMWS.
I like the idea of So Uptown. That's
So Uptown.
Yeah.
I think
the
anything
new,
is a great idea for a bottling.
So Uptown can be the new goat bread for trying to get it on a bottle, I guess.
Yeah, so that actually might edge it a little closer to the boutique, but I'm sure Rob and Kelly were both voting for that, so we can nudge it one further out. Anyway, spell check. Oh, that's funny. Anyway, that's cool. Like, I like the results on that. I like the fact that
Yeah.
people didn't just blindly follow us, Evan. There was lots of votes for the Soup Town, both the
Totally.
first and second vote. So
Well, Andrew, you're gonna have to take a look at the polls because I can't figure out how to get to the second poll that I created there.
all right. Well, we might have to stop sharing the first.
Yeah.
And then that's
Oh, now I can.
you got it? All right.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the entire whiskey calendar vote, broken into 3 different stages. So we've got day 1 to 9, followed by days 10 to 18, and days 10 to 25 for the third part. These are all multiple choice, so I'm assuming you'll pick like 1 or 2 from each. But I unfortunately have no authority over that, so I can't stop you if you do more.
Oh, so someone could vote for everything?
They could, which would I guess would be a good pat on the back for our selection process.
Yeah, I think if you could limit yourself to 3 throughout the
Yeah.
entire thing, that might be helpful. What we maybe could say is if there's disagreement and you're sharing a feed.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
can
like
add a
Tom,
few
Vi,
extra
and Frederick.
votes through
Yeah.
there, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, this was essentially just set up for Tom, Vi, and Frederick to all get a say, more than anything else.
Yeah.
And also so Rob wouldn't have to rely on Kelly's vote for things.
Or how do we know that it's not Kelly? I mean, relying on Rob's vote.
That's true.
All right, Evan, you've kind of hinted at it, but you know, what were your top 3 if you could identify them throughout the calendar this year?
Yeah, so I ended up doing a top 6 on the eventually, like, we keep on doing this and I keep on doing the blog post. It'll probably just be a top 20 out of the 25 in a couple of years. But my top 3
you could
would
just
be
reverse that and do like a bottom 5. Evan's bottom
That's
5
right.
picks
Yeah.
from the
My
these
least
are the
favorite,
5
but I'd
whiskeys
still buy
we
them. Yeah.
let you down the most on.
Yeah. So my top was definitely the society bottle. I was floored. It was exactly what I hoped it would be, which is it's not often that happens with a whiskey when you're anticipating something at the same time, because I saw the age and I saw the number that it was from and the name, and I was like, oh man, like this sounds like a really good bottle. And then I tried it and it still exceeded expectations for me. So I'm really, really happy that was in the calendar. So my second favorite that did oust the Boutique Tea and Inic from day 4 that I still absolutely love, to the point where my mini bottle of it is long gone, and I have purchased a full-size bottle of it, or a 500 ml bottle of it, because I had to have it. And then my third favorite would
Well, you got to name it though. You got to name it.
what's that?
You just told us what your number 3 was, but you
Oh,
didn't
sorry,
tell us what edged it out.
So the Boutique Tea and Inic is my number 2, and then the Boutique Inchbad is my number 3.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Which I may end up having to buy a bottle of as well, because that Inchbad is just such a cool whiskey.
All right. Since you've also got 4, 5, and 6, you might as well
Okay.
show
So
those two.
I've Paul John Peated Select ended up number 4. The Kilchoman Machir Bay was number 5, and the Isle of Raasay, pardon me, is number 6. Probably could have put the Boutique in there as well somewhere, but the Soup Town. But as I said, I already had a lot of Boutique on there. Andrew, can you remember back that far?
Yeah. The Scotch Malt Whisky Society for sure was number 1. Number 2, but I think it's purely based on bottle conditioning, was actually the Glendronach 12.
I thought that might be up there for you.
I actually was kind of stunned by that one, because I was expecting it to be good, but the fact that it was like 6 years in the bottle, I think that showed really well. I liked the Tea and Inic, but the Inchbad for me was number 3.
Cool.
And a close number 4 was the Saneg. I thought the Saneg was absolutely dynamite. And if I had to pick a 5th, it might be the Raasay. Raasay or Tianinnik, going back memory through this.
Yeah, that was a top notch last 5 overall there.
Mhm.
Even the Machir Bay, which I talked about being a bit more youthful, just shows so well as well. Okay, so we're sharing the results there. I'm just gonna go back to day number 1 and just take a look at what made it. So the first edition's Morlock got a lot of the votes in the first round there, which is very cool. That was a fun bottle that we had there. Boutique Tianinnik, of course, ended up winning that round. Everything got some votes, which was really neat to see, including the Milk and Honey red wine, which was a pretty interesting cask choice in my opinion. For the second round there, the Kilchoman Snag ended up tying with the Old Malt Cask Ben Rinnes KWM cask, which is again an excellent bottling as well. We still do have a few of the full-size bottles left if you guys are looking for that one. Really an underrated KWM cask, in my opinion, where it's one where if you give it time in the glass, it just opens up more and more.
Well, there's not much left. I think there's like 6
No.
bottles left.
Yeah, it's getting down there. And then for the last grouping, a couple of votes for the Millstone. I'm really looking forward to that full-size bottle coming. Boutique Inchvad got a few of the votes, as well as the Souptown, and then of course the Society bottle getting the most votes out of any in the lineup.
Yeah. It's not surprising how those numbers played out, but I
No.
love that neither of us mentioned the Ben Rinnes or the Mortlock, and those definitely finished in the top half.
Yeah.
And I'm just checking to see what else kind of crept in there too. Yeah, no, it's in everything except one whiskey got at least a single vote. So not bad.
I didn't look at that. Was it the Jack Daniels that didn't get a vote?
No, it was the sherry finished, or the Milk and Honey sherry cask.
Really? That's actually, so I've got it as one vote on mine. Yeah. That one, I actually preferred it to the red wine. I thought it was really well done.
The Jack Daniels actually got 3 votes. So how about that? I mean, there are different tastes out there. People have different tastes. But yeah, interested to see how that goes. Not sure what else we have to talk about, or whether we carry this on afterwards at all. But Evan, I want to say a huge thank you to you. I know you put an enormous amount of time into those blog posts. Certainly go above and beyond what I would have written if it was left to me. Yeah, I know you also, there's a lot of detail and things in there that are put in there. So, kudos to you on that. You did an incredible job on that.
Oh.
And
well,
yeah.
thank you.
I know for a lot of people, it's an important part of doing this, and the journey that people like to go on. Not as many people take part in the videos as I think maybe you or I would like, but at the same time, and we know the blog posts. We have customers coming in, commenting on them all the time. So all that.
Yeah, they're always fun to do, and that's why I essentially pushed Andrew out so that I could take over that. I really do enjoy the chance to sort of talk about what I love, but also get a little bit creative with the wording on things as sometimes happens. But I'm glad that all of you put up with it, and hopefully I'll be able to run through them all again next year. But yeah, thank you to you as well, Andrew. This is sort of a year plus long process to put these things together now. We have actually released a mini bottle that was supposed to be in the calendar that we have for sale as singles right now, just because it didn't make it in time.
Yeah, and that was the Armoric. I mean, we didn't mention it by name, but it's a peated French single malt, and it arrived our second last order before Christmas, which would not have been helpful.
Nope.
But I mean, Kelly talked about chatting. One of the reason we released it for sale is I think next year, which is going to be our 10th year doing the whiskey calendar, we're going to kind of upend the model a little bit and We're going to take a page out of Drinks by the Dram and That Boutique Whiskey Company's book. And I think we're going to start filling our own bottles. It will mean that we have to size the whole project down, but it's going to open up possibilities for what we can include in it.
Yeah.
So this decision is
If,
not final, but in classic Kensington fashion, we start talking about it before we do it, just to gauge feedback. But a big part of this was the, if I'm being honest, like the just bewilderment this year at how unreliable commitments to do these were for us, and not wanting to go through that again, and looking at it and saying, well, how much would it cost to just pay an employee for 2 months to fill bottles and label them? And is that maybe the better route to go? So next year's our 10th anniversary of doing the KWM Whisky Calendar, and seems like kind of a good time to, you know, shake things up a little bit. So it might look a little different next year, but anyway, we'll figure that out. We got at least a month before we need to start ordering the bottles and the box and everything. But yeah, that is a direction we might take things next year. So
well, it's we probably got enough Kensington Wine Market casks this year where we could have pulled off just a KWM cask calendar.
KWM calendar of KWM bottlings. Yeah, I don't
Not that
think
we would ever do that, but
no, and it's not something that's not kind of the direction we want to take it. But there would definitely be an opportunity to include things like that, or to include, you know, limited edition releases that otherwise become a pain in the ass to figure out who to give them to. Maybe they just end up in the calendar, some of them. So we can have some fun with it. But, you know, not all distilleries, not all independent bottlers are willing to do small format bottles for us. So that was kind of, for me, the moment where it's like, well, you know, maybe we need to start thinking about making a change, and maybe that in the end it'll be a better product. But, you know, the funny thing is, I was so nervous about this year's calendar. You know, we've talked about this before. There's 5 products that still have not even left, and I've basically told the people not to ship them. Some of you who weren't in the last tasting wouldn't have caught that. Stevely's 35 to 40 ml bottles that weren't quite 50s. Like literally he did that on the fly for us just to get this thing done. And if he hadn't, we wouldn't have finished this thing this year.
Regardless of the size of that bottle was a lifesaver. You know, and it's also like, how many calendars out there have had a cask sample in the mix?
It's not even bottled yet. But, and I won't name it, but there was another distillery that committed to doing this, and mid-November they're like, oh yeah, we can't get this, or not even mid-November, like, and I'd given up on them. They're like, we can't even get this to you until next year. And I was like, well, I don't want it anymore. Like, what do you mean you don't want it anymore? It's like, I needed it 2 months ago, and I told you that from the beginning, and so I'm not taking it. So anyway, that's the main reason why. But I think it's, you know, the first couple of years we did this, it was easy. Like we could get whatever we wanted. People were happy to do it. And I think the supply chain, the demand on production, all these things that have happened in the last few years have really taken away a lot of those opportunities and fun. The fortunate thing is it's forced us to chase people who are maybe a little bit more hungry. But I mean, I was really nervous about this year's calendar. I thought people would be disappointed by some elements of it. And, you know, we've repeatedly heard people tell us they thought this was one of the best ones yet. And that's people who've been doing it since the very beginning, 9 years ago. So we are going to do it next year. We don't 100% know what it's going to look like. But whatever we do, I can assure you it's going to be awesome. So
absolutely. So maybe this might be a good time to wave goodbye to the Facebook and the recording crowd. I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes at least.
all very different.
Yeah.
I guess we should unmute or should mute ourselves.
Yes.
All right, and I will let everybody in. I'm gonna hit mute all, Evan.
Okay.
Hey, everybody, good evening. Thanks for joining us. We're gonna get rolling here in a minute.